Hello and welcome to another episode of Debunk the Funk with Dr. Wilson. This is recorded on June 5th, 2023, and joining me today is Anders Hviid from Denmark. Anders, welcome.
Thanks.
So I think I want to start just by explaining to the audience why we're doing this. So the title of this video is Vaccines Don't Cause Autism, Duh. Most people, I think, know that vaccines do not cause autism, but here in America, we have a presidential candidate, RFK Jr., running who believes that vaccines do cause autism. And because he is running, he is causing a bit of a resurgence in some dark corners of the internet and social media like Twitter of this myth that vaccines cause autism. And you've encountered a little bit of that resurgence on social media. Is that right?
Yeah, you can say that. And I was quite surprised, right? Just at the back end of the pandemic. And now this pops up again.
Yeah. So these myths recycle themselves. And no matter how ridiculous they are, it's going to get recycled and people are going to encounter them for the first time. And so I thought I would have you on the channel because your work is directly relevant to that question. So I thought maybe you could go through just your scientific approach to the question, do vaccines cause autism? What you and your group did to address that question and what you found.
Sure. I mean, I'm an epidemiologist. And, I live in Denmark, the socialist utopia with free and universal health care, and also quite extensive register. And so, actually, since 1968, every resident of Denmark has been assigned a unique identifier. And this identifier is used in all our registers. And this also includes, registers of key demographic information and health-related information. And that's like perfect setting for epidemiology, because that means you can set up these fantastic nationwide cohort studies of million of people and follow them with complete follow-up of all their health-related events that you're interested in studying. And I don't think in the US, you have your insurance set up and you have different databases and health maintenance organizations. But one of the key challenges in the US, especially as you want to study something like autism, study things that happen over longer periods, is that people go in and out of your databases in the US, but we have them for life. Right. So we can follow them over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, as far back as the registers go, or as far back as when they're born. And that's sort of the setting we use to look at the hypothesis do vaccines cause autism.
And that's a pretty that's kind of how you would want to do it, because then you can track vaccination rates through that registry and also any diagnoses of conditions like autism. And so
so I don't think we need to spend too much time on a randomized clinical trials and discussing the feasibility of that.
Right. Yeah, because a randomized clinical trial, you would have to enroll children specifically to either receive vaccines or not receive vaccines. Why do that? Why do that when you can just look back through the documents and see who didn't receive vaccines, who did, and who got which diagnosis?
Yeah, and that's essentially what we've done. It's not very complicated. It's just about counting how many got an autism diagnosis among the vaccinated, how many got it among the unvaccinated.
Right, and so you did a study that did just that a while ago, over 10 years ago. How long exactly was it?
The first study we did was in 2002 in the New England Journal of Medicine, where we looked at the MMR hypothesis and looked at a little over 500,000 children.
And what did that find?
Yeah, we found that there wasn't really any difference between the rate of diagnosis in those who were vaccinated and those who vaccinated with respect to the MMR vaccine and those who didn't receive the MMR vaccine.
Right. And that's been consistent with lots of other work in the literature over the years.
Sure, yeah. And also our later study. I think a good starting point with autism and the hypothesis is to say that it's probably not the first place you would look for a causing factor. Vaccines, the heritability of autism is, at least in the Nordic countries, it's 80%. 80% of the variation is explained by their genes. Currently, I think over 100 genes have been identified as being related to autism. So it's not obvious that vaccines would be a major etiological factor in the development of autism.
Right. Yeah. But I think one reason that this myth kind of persists the way it does is that parents take their children to get vaccines, and if you have millions of parents all doing this, then some of them are going to start to notice signs of autism shortly after vaccination, and they're going to tell that story. But in those cases, there's a lot of emotion and memory recall issues that can confound a parent's experience. So really, you have to look at the data, which is what you've done.
Yeah, and then there's really no reason. I mean, you could have all, theoretically, you can have all, for all cases of autism ever, you could have symptom onset after a vaccine. It wouldn't mean anything, wouldn't necessarily point towards causality. I mean, the first autism, I mean, for many of those who get the diagnosis, you're not able to tell when they are in the first year of life anyway, only in the most severe cases. So normally you have to be at a certain age before you begin to notice there is some traits that are consistent with autism, right? That they typically occur at the same time or after receipt of the MMR vaccine.
Right. And so one other thing that your work showed, which I thought was quite significant, was some people who see the data that MMR vaccines don't cause autism will say, well, what about other vaccines? But I think your more recent paper on this topic showed that it doesn't matter that which vaccine, because you included a group that had no vaccines, and the difference was there was still no difference in autism rates. Is that right?
Yeah. And because we had the study was so large, the 2019 study, I mean, yeah, we also looked at the MMR association among children according to the infant vaccines they received. And among those who hadn't received any infant vaccines in the first year of life, we looked at the association between MMR and development of autism, and there was also no association there. I mean, prior to that, we also visited I mean, first it was MMR because of the Wakefield paper in '98. After that, it was the thimerosal preservative in the vaccines, the fact that it contains an organic mercury compound. And we also looked at that almost 20 years ago in Denmark, because in Denmark it was removed quite abruptly from we used a whole cell pertussis vaccine. At that time, that was before the acellular vaccines entered the market here at least, and so we had sort of like a natural experiment where we could look at children getting the same vaccine but with and without thimerosal over a relatively short period, and there was also no difference in risk of getting a diagnosis.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what people who believe these myths tend to do. They will say first that it's one thing, the MMR vaccine, and then when science pretty convincingly shows that that's not the case, they'll switch and say, oh, it's actually the thimerosal. And then thimerosal gets removed and autism rates are unaffected by the removal of thimerosal. And then they say it's something else. And it just keeps going.
Yeah, it's the aluminum. Now it's the
Right.
aluminum.
Now it's the aluminum.
Yeah.
So
and probably also and there's also this idea of there's too many vaccines, and too many vaccines, they overwhelm the immune system.
Yeah.
The idea. Yeah.
Right. But that idea has been pretty debunked over the years several times, because even back when children used to get one vaccine, the smallpox vaccine, they would be exposed to about 200 different antigens in that one vaccine. Now, even though we have a lot of vaccines on the schedule, children are exposed to a few dozen, if that, antigens. So it's not overwhelming for the immune system at all. But I wanted to ask, so this, you work in a community, a scientific community with a lot of colleagues who all are looking at this question or have looked at this question of whether or not vaccines carry these risks, including autism. And so just how does your community, your colleagues, view this idea? Is there anybody who is entertaining it, or does everybody think at this point that it's just ridiculous?
I don't know of anyone who would entertain that idea that vaccines cause autism.
Right.
Again, you have to look at the totality of the evidence. What do we know about autism today? And I mean, it heavily favors that vaccines are not involved.
Right. It's been a question that's been explored extensively, I think, is the point. And there's just no evidence for it. But in your view, what are some of the more annoying myths that you see pop up over and over again, maybe that we haven't discussed yet, that you think that there has been work to address?
With respect to autism?
Yes.
Vaccine? No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm sure something else will come out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the ideas don't go very deep. They're just there's really not much to them. But yeah, I think we've covered pretty much all the talking points, the major talking points about the data, where people claim that there's an association, but you just look and there just isn't. There just isn't one. And I'm not sure what better experimental design you could have where you can look back through decades of documented medical history and find just no association.
I mean, something we could do if I were to do another study, could maybe do one of these case-based methods. If the hypothesis was that it would be there would be a clustering of diagnosis, right? So typically we have these Bradford Hill causality criteria, and we say, well, clustering of an outcome is one of the signs of causality, right?
Mm.
And some of the case-based study designs are well suited to that. If we could agree on some kind of period where this clustering should occur, and they have the advantage that they are less susceptible to confounding factors and stuff like that. That we are that we are concerned with in observational research, right? That we don't want sort of the confounding factors that are associated with getting the vaccine and developing autism, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I guess I think we can go on to the next part of this video where I just want to talk a little bit about why I think that these ideas in particular are just gross. These myths that vaccines cause autism are often accompanied by this view that autism is just a terrible thing. And I think that is really demeaning or devaluing to people who are autistic. Do you have any thoughts or maybe any motivations in your life as to why you do this kind of research?
I mean, I've not done that much autism research, so that's not a sort of something that motivates me, the autism aspect of it. I'm more from I'm coming from the study of vaccines, their effects in the observational settings, the pharmacoepidemiology of it. But of course, I hear what you're saying, and there is I mean, it is quite problematic to make it into a severe disease for all of those who get the diagnosis. It's a very, very broad spectrum, and you also see in our data that people are getting the diagnosis at 5, 6, 7, or even later, right? And what we've also seen is this industry, I think, particular in some European countries, but also in the US, this industry growing up who's making a business out of treating or trying to cure it with sedation or homeopathy or all these kinds of alternative treatments, which are, of course, not at all regulated or studied, right?
Right.
So it's very hypocritical in that sense. But maybe I was naive in the beginning, but now I understand that people are, making money off it. And as you mentioned yourself, you can also see people making it into some kind of platform that they can get political influence on, and that is, as a scientist, that's deeply disturbing, right? Because you're concerned with getting to some kind of truth about how the world works, and it's very antithetical to that.
Yeah, that's an important point, that parents will have their children receive an autism diagnosis, and then they'll begin treating them with unproven treatments that don't work and can be harmful to the child. And it's just really unfortunate that a lot of parents see it that way, because I think when when autistic people can speak for themselves, they'll say that they're just different. It's just a brain type, that it's not a disease. It's not something that makes them less than. They're valuable people. They don't deserve to be viewed as some scourge caused by vaccines. So I think it's really upsetting in that sense to see this myth stick around.
Yeah, I was actually visited by a young teenager with autism from Holland, just in the start of 20th century, just before the pandemic, and he was very concerned about this, also what was going on in Holland. This, I don't know how you would say it in English, but making it into a disease in that way, and trying to treat it with all kinds of weird treatments, and also behavioral therapy, right? So that they just had to learn to be like everyone else, and then it would stop, go away. Yeah, instead of as you said, not considering it as a disease.
Right. Yeah. So I think, one thing I want to do with this video not only is to help address those myths, but one thing I'm doing is all of the ad revenue that this video makes on YouTube is going to be donated to the Autistic Self Advocacy Network, which is a advocacy network run by autistic people, so they can speak for themselves and advocate for themselves and not have anti-vaxxers trying to speak for them. So that's one thing I want to do with this. But I want to thank you, Honors, for your time, and just ask, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, I mean, it is a little bit depressing that this is popping up again, and we're probably going to hear more about it, since it's going to be perhaps a feature of the election process.
Yeah.
In US. It is a bit like, this game called Whack-A-Mole.
Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps popping up and you keep hitting it on the head with the hammer, but it comes back. And it is just in general concerning to me, this anti-science that we've also seen a lot of, both in public and also on social media in the pandemic, right? And I fear that this will just be feeding off of that and growing even stronger.
Yeah, it is a concern that these anti-vaccine myths about general childhood vaccination are going to feed off of the misinformation that came out of the pandemic. But on the bright side, like I said, these myths have always recycled themselves throughout history, even back through smallpox vaccines. Similar misinformation was around, and it didn't stop us from eradicating smallpox. These myths have not stopped us from driving disease rates really, really far down. So I think if we just keep fighting misinformation and learning how to fight it better, then we'll be able to better deal with it each time these myths pop up. And so I thank you for taking the time to do that here.
I'll just say that we do see it. I mean, we do see that when the vaccination uptake drops, directly related to these issues.
Right.
And we have seen death caused by it. It's probably not, Denmark is in that place where, because of our health system, that we are in a great danger. But in less advanced societies, it is a danger. And I could go on and on. Also, the HPV vaccine, clearly a vaccine that protects against cervical cancer. If the uptake drops, for sure there are going to be girls who go on to develop cervical cancer that could have been prevented, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully that.
It's important to keep that in mind, that they are still there, the infectious diseases, and waiting.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But Honors, if people want to learn more about this topic or find more about your work, where would you point them to? Yeah. I'll link your papers in the description. But anyway, I think we can end the video here, and I'll again thank you for your time, and you take care.
Yeah, keep up the good work.
Okay, thank you. You as well.
Bye.